Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for the latest Ryan Murphy hit show, Pose. And what Pose is essentially about is basically we center on late 1980s and basically on this thing called the Ball, which basically was this function that was made for anyone that was either transgender or in the LGBT community. It was basically their way of feeling inclusive and their way of basically getting to be who they wanted to be. And basically we follow a bunch of individuals who are a part of this organization and basically see how they live and function and basically see what they can to be treated as human beings. And that's really all I'm going to say. So, with Pose in general, I'm going to reiterate what I've said with many of Ryan Murphy's shows. I was cautiously optimistic for this show. I really do like Ryan Murphy. I think he's a very good creator. Do I think he's the genius that everyone says that he is? No, and that's solely because he's a guy who, while he is very talented and has a lot of really great ideas, he very rarely explores them to full effect. And a lot of times when he does something that's original, there's so many things that are percolating through his head that a lot of things that he'll set up are suddenly, you know, they're suddenly retconned and suddenly something else happens. And that's happened a lot with American Horror Story and many of his other shows. And that's why something like Feud, I think, is one of the better things he's written because he had a lot more limitations and you can tell that he was a bit more stifled with that show. So when it came to Pose, while I definitely was excited for it, not just because of the inclusivity and things like that, I was still very worried because I was hoping that it wouldn't fall into that Ryan Murphy trap, and thankfully, that's not the case at all. Pose is much better than I ever could have imagined. This is a fantastic show that is for sure one of the best shows I have seen so far this summer, but we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And going into the show, that is immediately, I think, one of the biggest draws of the show, mainly because if you guys don't know, most of the cast in the show is, I believe, 90% actual transgender actors and actresses, and I think that's actually really great that they were able to do that. And are these guys the most amazing actors ever? No. You can tell that they are a bit inexperienced, but the ones that are great really do stick out, particularly MJ Rodriguez as our main character, Blanca, who, this is an ensemble, but Blanca, for the most part, is our main character, and she was fantastic in this show. I mean, this is someone who, right from the beginning, you really do sympathize with her. You know, you get into who Blanca really is, and her storyline in particular, I really did love, but Rodriguez really does shine as this character very well. You feel a lot of emotion for her. You really do want her to succeed. You know, you want her house to succeed. You know, she's trying to become this mother and, you know, to all these various different people, and I think she did a really great job, particularly in the second half of the season. I think she really shined, and I really did love what she did here. I think she definitely is one of the best, I think, breakout stars I've seen so far on TV this year. I really love what we saw from her here, and I think she was just incredible in the show. But someone else who absolutely shines throughout this entire show is Billy Porter as Pray Tell, who, look, I have already been, you know, grazed with the presence of Porter and very impressed by him in Kinky Boots and things like that, but he was on another level in this show. Not only do we care immensely for his character because of who Pray Tell really is, and immediately we enjoy, you know, his very spunky, just very sassy delivery whenever he is the announcer for the Ball, but you also really do get into who Pray Tell is, and I think he, more than anyone, had some of the best emotional moments on this entire show, particularly in a certain revelation with him happens that I'm not going to get into. I really love where they end up going with his character, and him and Rodriguez, I think, honestly have the best chemistry out of everyone. I thought they worked so well together. I really love what he did in the show, and Billy Porter, you know, this is not someone that a lot of people probably knew going into this unless you are, you know, you are a avid theater goer and things like that, like myself, but you know, after the show, definitely, I think he is definitely put himself out there, and I can't wait to see what he does after the show because he was just incredible here. And as far as the rest of the cast goes, I think everyone really did do a pretty great job here. Dominique Jackson, you know, Indya Moore, and again, while these guys aren't the most experienced of actors, and you can definitely tell, they really do shine as the show went on. A lot of the actors that I thought I was kind of iffy on, I actually did think got progressively better as the show went on. And then, of course, Evan Peters and Kate Mara and James Van Der Beek, they still do a very good job in their respective roles, as always. I think really everyone was pretty good here. The only one I didn't really like that much was Ryan Jamaal Swain as the character of Damon. I just thought he was kind of miscasted here, but that's more in regards to his character and things like that than maybe him as an actor overall, but I just thought he was a little too corny for my liking. Everyone else felt like they were on a level of realism, and whenever he came in. But now let's get to the stuff I really want to talk about, the directing and the writing, because again, like I said, this is a Ryan Murphy production, and I was very much worried that the tone was going to be all kinds of corny, it was going to be very over the top, and it was going to be very hard to take this show seriously. Because I'm not going to lie, I do enjoy American Horror Story a lot, but there are points where that show goes way too over the top, and it's very hard to actually take it seriously. It's one of the reasons I'm very glad that last season was a satire, because you didn't have to take it as seriously. It acknowledged when it was being a little, you know, just a little outrageous and silly, and I think they did a very good job with that. Here, on the other hand, this show, while it definitely can get a bit corny, and there definitely are some really funny moments, it, for the most part, is one of the more nuanced works I have seen of Murphy's career. This show, in general, it's very human, and I thought that the drama especially was very well handled here, and I think the way the show balances its tones is better than most shows I've seen even this year. I think the comedy was always on point, especially when we are going through, you know, the different houses and they're insulting each other. It's just a lot of fun to watch, or the family dynamic. You know, there are a lot of things that they'll say to each other, but then the drama as well is really great. And what I really do love about the show is both of those tones are really done to the highest effect possible. When the show wants you to feel extreme joyfulness, it is incredibly joyful, and they do a very good job with that. But when the show also wants you to, you know, be a little bit more dramatic and get to some of the more hard-hitting moments, it does that very well too. And never does the show feel too preachy. Never does the show feel one-sided. Never is the show trying to make you be like, oh, you must feel this way, or, you know, it's trying to hammer in the same point. It really was not as on the nose as I might have expected it to be. And I'm not saying that, you know, the stuff this show is talking about isn't important, because it absolutely is, but I think the show did it in a very nuanced manner, and it wasn't too preachy about it, and I was very happy about that overall. And I think that the directing was very much on point in that regard. But then, of course, there is the writing here, which, like I said, you know, immediately is going to draw tons of attention because of its inclusivity and because of it being a mainly all transgender cast, minus a few actors here and there. You know, definitely that is going to usher in tons of talent. Now, I'm glad it's doing that, but take that out of the equation, this is still a very good show. And what I really do love about the show is that it's really not solely based on just transgender actors. In fact, that is the least interesting thing about it. The most interesting thing about the show is how human it really is. I mean, that really is what this show is about. It's about these characters trying to be treated like normal human beings, and how difficult that was in the 1980s. And not just for transgenders. The show covers a lot of stuff like homelessness and prostitution and drug use and, you know, these hierarchies and things like that, and, you know, middle class and lower class as well, all kinds of different, you know, states of living, all kinds of different political systems. It covers a lot of things, and it never feels too overstuffed in that regard, and I think they did a very good job with that. The show easily could have been very overstuffed, and they could have been juggling a lot of things at once, but Thankfully, they really don't. I really did feel like everything was balanced quite well here. And that's mainly because of the characters we're following. The characters we're following on this show are pretty great. I really did love a lot of the characters. I already talked about Blanca, but this character is just fantastic. I really loved where she ended up going. You know, she starts off and immediately, you know, we find out has contracted AIDS, and basically, you know, throughout the rest of the show, she's trying to get out of her house because she feels like she's being a bit segregated and no one's really listening to her, and she wants to, you know, make an impact on the world, and she knows that she only has a little bit of time left, and because of that, she wants to make her own house where she can recruit as many people as possible, and immediately this really does draw us to her, and there are a lot of characters that are very well written in that way. And the family dynamic between all these characters is definitely one of the best parts of this show. I really loved, you know, getting to know the House of Evangelista more. There are so many great dynamics there, like I said, whether it is Blanca and Pray Tell, or Blanca and Angel, or Blanca and Damon. I just thought they all worked very well together, and it just gave the show this really nice sense of warmth and this sense of just fun that I really did love. The show really definitely did tug at my heartstrings quite a few times, and I think some of the most heartwarming moments are really in that family dynamic. Some of the most heart-wrenching as well, but it's a very heartwarming for the most part, and I think they did a very good job with giving you the sense of hope that I really did love seeing throughout this show. But that's only really scratching the surface of how well done the characters really are here. There are also fantastic characters like Elektra, someone who starts off the show and is virtually quite unlikable. She's very militant. She's very like, this is how I'm doing things, and, you know, you don't get to run this house. But as the show goes on, we start to see more and more layers of her character, who she really is. You know, how she kind of feels a bit vulnerable because she has this relationship with this guy who clearly doesn't necessarily like the fact that she, you know, actually respects the fact that she is transgender, but she wants to she wants to have surgery. She wants to be able to become a full woman, and yet this guy isn't necessarily respecting her of that, and I thought that storyline was very well done, and there's many really well-written storylines in that way, and I think they just did a very good job with the characters here. These characters are not at all one note. These characters are actually very well balanced, and I think they're some of the best written, they're some of the most well-written I've seen in any Ryan Murphy show, mainly because, again, he never goes off the rails with them. He actually does keep them quite grounded, and I was very happy about that here. I thought, you know, for sure there are times where he could have done that, but thankfully he doesn't. Now, as far as the Evan Peters and Kate Mara storyline go, you will notice that, yeah, at first it is a bit out of place. And when the show started, I was like, okay, where is this really going? How does this tie into the main narrative? What are they really trying to do here? But as the show went on, and they started to dive deeper into that storyline, I started to understand the significance of it. I really started to get behind it. The show isn't using it just because, oh, it's Evan Peters and he's, you know, in all of Ryan Murphy's productions and we need someone recognizable. Sure, that is definitely why it's in here, because unfortunately, having a cast full of just transgender actors, it's not going to sell well to a broader audience. Maybe to a certain audience it will, but to widespread audience, it's just not going to sell as well. You do need someone, unfortunately, like Evan Peters or like Kate Mara to helm it. But as the show goes on, you do start to understand who this character really is. What the show really is trying to get into is the idea of, can someone who's not gay, you know, can they still be attracted to someone that is transgender? Is there something wrong with that? You know, what is really, you know, what is really, how can that really happen? You know, especially in the 1980s when that was just such an anomaly. It wasn't anything you heard about. I mean, transgender people in general kind of was an anomaly. I mean, sure, you saw them, but they definitely were not respected like they were today. They definitely were not as shall we say, you know, they weren't as open as they were today. They weren't as welcome as they were today. If anything, they were very much admonished for it, and people were very, you know, they were just horrible to them. And you see someone like Stan, who you think is going to go in this direction, and no, he actually is attracted to this character of Angel, and where they end up going with it, I thought actually was very interesting, and I really did overall enjoy that. So what became a storyline that I thought could have just been there because they had to have a recognizable actor actually did serve a greater purpose, and I actually did really enjoy it overall. And the character of Angel as well, I also really did enjoy, and I thought their relationship was actually one of the strongest parts of the show, honestly. But something else I think the show deals with so well is what it has to say about the HIV/AIDS disease, because I have seen this topic handled in many different things, specifically Rent comes to mind, and to be honest, this handles that much better. And I've heard a lot of people say that there is no tension on this show. There is no actual drama on this show. And I completely disagree, because right from the opening moments when we're introduced to, you know, when we're introduced to Blanca's character, we know that she has contracted AIDS. We know immediately that she is on borrowed time. And the show really does delve into that. There are quite a few characters that are on that spectrum where they have either contracted HIV or they're worried about having it. It was a very scary time in the 80s, and the show really does not try to gloss over it. They really do delve deep into what this can do to you, and, you know, what this does to a person, how someone feels who is on that spectrum, who is very close to, you know, dying and things like that, who knows that they don't have much time left in the world. And I think that in general does show that, yeah, this show does have a lot of tension, because you don't know when this character is about to go, what these characters' last moments are going to be. And sure, maybe this show, it isn't as tragic as it could be, but again, it's only the first season. Obviously, Blanca's not going to die in the first season. She's kind of the main character. There's no way that she's going to die just yet, but they definitely do set up some very potentially tragic stuff, and the show, like I said, it does not try at all to gloss over that. And so for the people who are saying, oh, the show is not tragic enough and it's too predictable, that I really don't understand, and I think it's one of the best things I've seen in this entire show. There are so many moments that deal with HIV that are just so tragic to think about, and the fact that this was going on and it was so awful, and rarely anyone did anything to stop it. There wasn't a cure or anything. It's just devastating to think about, and it just feels far too real from what actually did happen in that time period, and I think they handled it very well here. However, the show is still not perfect. There are a few things here and there that I do think that the show doesn't do great writing-wise, and that is that, yes, there are a few too many characters. While a lot of the characters do feel very fleshed out, there are some that are a bit one-note, particularly whenever we cut to the character of Damon. Damon is a character that on paper can work really well. The setup for him I really loved. He is someone who's gay. His family is incredibly unaccepting of it. They basically evict him from the house because of it, and basically he's forced to go out on his own, and we see that Blanca does take him under her wing. And yes, that is a very good story. It's just the problem is they don't really focus on this character a lot. And the character immediately in the show, he is recruited by this prestigious dance school over what feels like just a couple days. Like, he auditions and immediately he's part of this, you know, like this very, like I said, prestigious, uppity, dance program, and it just does not feel very real. It also doesn't help that he's really not that great of a dancer, and in general, his storyline I just was not really that drawn into. I like the scenes between him and Blanca, but I just needed more of him, and I felt like the show, they kept saying, oh, he's this great dancer, and oh, he's making so much great progress, but we just don't see enough of it. There's a total of maybe 4 or 5 dance scenes from this character, and I just needed a bit more there. I really did not feel they focused on that enough, and I think they could have done more with that. Also, as much as I did enjoy the Stan storyline, I did feel that because of how much they focus on everything else, that storyline does definitely get shortchanged a bit, particularly with Kate Mara's character. the direction her character goes into, I definitely did not expect at all. I really did like where they ended up taking her character, because they could have taken her in a really kind of soap opera-ish direction, and they really didn't. But I just felt that we didn't get enough of her. I really wanted to dive a little bit deeper into her character, and especially the way the season ends, it feels like this is the only season we're going to get of her. I can't see them going back to her character, or Evan Peters' character, sadly, and I just was a little bit disappointed by her character overall. I needed a little bit more there, and I just felt that unfortunately we did not get it. Thankfully for a lot of the characters, they were in very well. It's just a few characters here and there that I feel could have gotten just a little bit more development that sadly just wasn't there. Also, I will admit that, yes, some of the things in the show are very predictable, particularly in the back half of the season. A lot of things that go down you can see coming from a mile away, but it's not one of those things where I was annoyed by, because the things that happened, I wanted to happen. I wanted to see this character succeed. I wanted, you want to see the house of Evangelista prevail. You want to see the house of, you want to see them function as a family. You want to see Blanca do really well as a mother. You want to see her bond with, Damon and with Preytel and all of them. You want to see them bond. You want to see these characters, just be very victorious in that way. And then at the same time, you do expect certain things to happen. And again, while it is predictable, it's not predictable in a frustrating sense, because there really, for me, wasn't a better outcome for where they end up going with it, so I wasn't really all that bothered by it overall. And look, again, do you really feel the conflict between the House of Evangelista and House of Abundance? Not really. You can tell which one is going to succeed and which one isn't. The show doesn't really try to set up any sort of bait and switch where, oh no, this house is thriving much better. They don't really do that. But at the same time, like I said, the characters are so interesting, and the places they go with it, despite that general conflict, are virtually pretty unpredictable, and things I definitely did not expect to happen, and I did really like where they end up going. They do go into some pretty dark territory towards the end of this season involving those two houses, particularly in the penultimate episode of this season. Where they end up going with it is insane, and I don't really know where they're really going to go from there with that, but it really was unpredictable in that sense. So like I said, sure, there are things that are predictable, but for everything that's predictable, there's something that's unpredictable, and I think they did handle that quite well here. In terms of cinematography, though, this is some of the best I have seen in any Ryan Murphy show. He is always a master when it comes to production design, things like that, but this is some of the best he's had for any show. I mean, just immediately, you feel like you're in the 1980s. You hear that score, and you see the costumes, and you see the lavish sort of fashions that they had back then, and it definitely does feel like the late 80s. They do a very good job with conveying that time period, but also when we get to the ball, it's some of the most gorgeous stuff I have seen in the longest time. It is so colorful. It is so lavish. It is so just, it's so on point, and it's hard to put into words, honestly, the way they were able to convey it, but it almost felt like Ryan Murphy was a part of that time period. And I don't know if the people who are writing the show actually were a part of the ball in the 1980s, but it definitely felt that way. It felt like this was an actual ball. It felt like they stepped right into one of those areas, and it didn't really feel like it was a set at all. They did such a great job with that, and especially, like I said, when you're seeing the different competitions that they're doing, and you're seeing the different fashions that they're wearing, it's just amazing to look at, and I think they just handled that perfectly. I really did love the style of the show, and it never feels style over substance. Like, the way it's done, it definitely does feel like it's warranted for it to feel that way, and it very well could have felt style over substance, but like I said, there's so much character within the cinematography that it almost does become its own character in that way. I mean, there's just so much detail there, and I think they did such an incredible job giving it this sense of, like I said, this just lavishness that I just haven't really seen in other Ryan Murphy productions. He really did go all out here, I have to say. And then the score to the show I also really love. I really do love the 80s music and things like that. I think that really does work very well with this show. And the editing. I will say, did this show need to be 8 episodes long? Yes, I do think 8 episodes was a good length, But I think they could have added a little bit more to, like I said, some of the scenes here and there. I did think some of the characters were underused and things like that. And the pacing at points was a little bit off, particularly this time jump that happens in like the 4th episode. While I get why they did it, it was just a little bit jarring and it was a little bit unbelievable at first. But once they did get into it, I started to, you know, get on board with what was going on. It just took a little while for me to fully get into everything. Now, where they go from here, I'm not entirely sure. The way this season ends, it could have easily been the ending. You definitely get the sense that it could have just ended here, and we didn't really need that second season, but it's been renewed for a second season, which I'm happy about, but at the same time, I just don't really know where else this show is really going to go, if he is going to continue with these characters, or if it's going to be another anthology series and be a completely different storyline next season. I just don't really know what we're really going to ultimately do there, but we'll just have to see the way that does turn out once we cross that bridge, I guess. So overall, guys, Pose is such a fantastic show. Not only is it a show that is very inclusive and is really centering on a group of people that unfortunately have been very, haven't really been represented in TV enough before, but it also really does tell a very good human story about characters who, at the end of the day, want to simply be just that. It doesn't matter what they sexually identify as. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter where their background is from. They just, in general, want to be human, and I think the show tells that story very well. Sure, it's a story we've seen done before, but because of the fact that it's centering on this group of people that we have not really seen enough of, and it's telling the story that is actually very true, despite the fact that characters are a work of fiction. The story itself is, you know, further, it couldn't be enough, you know, couldn't be more closer than the truth. I think that in general, the story just resonates a lot more than others have. It has such a fantastic ensemble cast who, no, like I said, they're not the greatest actors in the world, but they definitely do what they need to do, and I think they'll definitely get there as actors for sure. The cinematography is some of the best I have seen. It just in general is, I think, one of the best things that Ryan Murphy has truly ever done. Does it have its problems here and there? Yes, like I said, it's not a perfect show or anything, but it's one of the most promising shows he has put out. It's an original show, and the fact that I can say a Ryan Murphy original show is nothing less than extraordinary, I think is incredible, and I think definitely shows that he is definitely improving as a writer and director. Again, I don't know if he was helped with this one or anything, but from what I gathered, besides the fact that he had a little bit from like Stephen Canals and things like that, virtually all of it was written by him, and I think just in general he did a very good job with that. It's a very well-written show, and even if you aren't someone who is on that spectrum, again, just take away the whole it being, you know, 90% transgender actors and actresses, the show is still great on its own. It works as this vehicle to just tell these very human stories in a way that we clearly haven't seen before, and I think in general that is enough of a reason to check the show out. This is definitely one of the best shows I have seen so far this summer, and I'm definitely going to give Pose Season 1 overall an A-. Seriously, guys, check out the show as soon as you can. This is definitely of the highest recommendation. I truly can't believe it's as good as it really turned out. I was, like I said, very iffy on it when it was first coming out, but it turned out to be way better than I really did expect it to be. But that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed. See you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.